We are in Daniel chapter 11, and if you're, of course, over in the Old Testament, you're going to need to find two other books. You're going to need to find the book of Deuteronomy. That's really easy. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then the book of Hosea. And if you don't have a Bible with you, there's Bibles in that front area in front of you if you'd like to join us with that. But we're in Daniel chapter 11, verse 1 through 4. And it says in Daniel 11, 1 through 4, "In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be of assistance and a protection for him." If you would, in your Bible, circle verse 1. And the reason why I asked you to do that, probably some of you in your studying caught the fact that the many commentators say that Daniel chapter 11, verse 1 should not be the first verse in Daniel chapter 11. Did any of you catch that when you were doing your studies? Okay, so forget that. But there's a group of theologians that believe that this verse should go with the last chapter. And as I read through that whole debate and that whole argument, I just kept sitting there going, yay. As I told you one time before, you remember when the Bible was written, it wasn't divided into books, chapters, verses like we deal with today. It was letters, and it was, documents of things. And so the whole argument of that is kind of dippy. So in the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be of assistance and a protection for him. We are living in a time of rebellion, just flat out. In fact, the whole 11th chapter chronicles the reign of rebellion amongst mankind. It goes through all these historical things that happen, and we're not going to get out of that. What we had to experience today is mind-numbing, and it hurts. But what we experience today is part of what goes on. If you are any studier, if you've ever been through anything that involved Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and all of that, Socrates got up and made a bunch of statements, and he got executed because of those statements. And so today, I'm in a world where it's in the middle of war. And in the middle of that war, and in the middle of the battle from Daniel, as we started back with the statue and divided everything up and said, these are the different times that are going to come, we walk all the way down to where we're living today. We started out with the Babylonian Empire, and then we went to the Medo-Persian Empire, and then to the Greek Empire, and then to the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire was the legs on that statue that went down to the feet, and most of us believe with all of our hearts that we are living in the time of the feet. And as I said to a group this morning, that whole thing of at the end of the iron is this clay or tile and iron that will not mix properly together, and that becomes the toes. And I said again to them, you don't have to worry about the toes. I listened to all these theologians that write all these books that they're all worried about where's going to get divided and who's going to do this and who's going to do that. How many of you know that there's this wonderful thing called the rapture? Okay, and so since there's a rapture, you're not going to be here in that time, and you don't have to worry about it. You can get in heaven and go, explain the toes to me, okay? But you're probably not going to do that at first. Okay. So in the middle of all of the battles, the hard part that we have to deal with is from the Babylonian Empire through all the different kingdoms that followed next, and tonight is just a dividing of one of those. Through all of this stuff that followed, every bit of it was taking place because there was a group of people that were not being obedient to God. Every one of you in this room, and again, I'm sorry I have to make it personal that way, but every one of you in this room that have some form of love for God and care for God, and you think fondly of God and you believe something about God, how many of you are like that? Okay, so if you're anything like that, you do know that he doesn't appreciate bull and nonsense. Okay, he doesn't look at you and go, okay, you're one of my kids. You can just live like you want to. I meet people every once in a while that go, well, God doesn't do anything to me. Okay, well, I'm sorry, biblically, you don't know him. Because if you know him, he will discipline you, and he will bring things about in your life to help you grow that are going to be a struggle. So why I'm saying that is because from the Babylonian Empire all the way down through the Roman Empire, Daniel got all excited when he read Jeremiah, and Jeremiah said 70 years, and Daniel went, whoa, we're at 68 or 69 years. This is getting ready to end. The only problem, it didn't end. And as I told you before, the reason why it didn't end was because all the people of God that had come to the Babylonian Empire and set in Babylon, all of a sudden they figured out they liked these really nice houses and fancy clothes and all the great food and all this other stuff, and they didn't want to go back home. So Daniel all of a sudden hits this wall about, this is not going like I thought it would go. So in the midst of all of his prayers, this angel shows up. And one of the things the angel's trying to get across is I'm sorry, Daniel, but you need to understand, both for you and for everyone that's going to read your book, this is what God does. Deuteronomy, if you'll turn to that, chapter 4. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, 5th book in the Bible. Some individuals call it the second law. It's the repeating of it. But the Deuteronomy, verse 25, says, when you father children and have grandchildren, and you grow old in the land, and you act corruptly, and make an idol in the form of anything, and do what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you today, that you will certainly perish quickly from the land where you are going over the Jordan to take possession of it. So guys, before you go into the land, understand, if you do this, this is what happens. You'll not live long on it, but will be utterly destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord drives you. There you will serve gods, G-O-D-S, the work of human hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell anything. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you'll find him if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul. When you're in distress and all these things happen to you in the latter days, you'll return to the Lord your God and listen to his voice. For the Lord your God is a compassionate God. He will not abandon you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant with your fathers which he swore to them. So this is, and I just thought of this, don't worry about going to Hosea. This is kind of what you're going to find all throughout the Old Testament. All throughout the Old Testament, you're going to find God saying, I brought you into the promised land. I want you to understand you're going to live there. You're going to go through this stuff. And as long as you serve me and as long as you follow me, things will go a certain way. The instant you don't do that, you be prepared for something to happen. Okay? The children of God went through this quite a few times, as you know, and good old Daniel thought that everything was going to be good at the end of 70 years. It was all going to get fixed. He thought that the land of Israel would be restored. He thought that the city of Jerusalem would be rebuilt, and he thought the temple would stand as beautiful as it had before, but none of that happened. And so with none of that happening, he starts praying, and in the middle of his praying, this angel shows up. He's going through this long conversation with this angel. We've been through all the verses. We start tonight with where this angel looks at him and says in verse 1, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be of assistance and a protection for him. Okay, the him that it's talking about is Michael the angel. We learned last week about a spiritual battle that's taking place on this planet that we live on. We learned that there are demons that are organized. We've learned that they're in a rank. They're in specific places in the world. And we've learned that they're assigned to certain areas. And we deduce through that there is a battle. You've read that in the Bible before. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, don't turn to it. It says, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. And all of my life, I've been just like you. Today, I'm sorry, heard all the news. My first reaction was to start praying. My second reaction after I heard that he passed away was to be very, very, very upset. I'm very upset at whoever did this horrible, nasty thing. But the kick is that the human being that did the horrible, nasty thing is not the enemy. The enemy is these characters that are demonic. And we learned that Michael is this specific angel that fights for the nation of Israel. And now we learn that the angel we have been listening to and been hearing what he has said is the one that is assisting Michael. He says in this verse, I arose to be of assistance and a protection for him. Whatever word your Bible uses, because some of you have a different version than the New American Standard, please underline the word protection, because we deal with the word assistance when it comes to the other angel and Michael all the time. We just go, oh, well, yeah, okay, Michael's this really great angel, and he's the one that's doing all this stuff. Well, that goes a little deeper than that, because apparently this angel is also involved in giving protection for Michael, like Michael was giving protection for him. Okay? Next thing we deal with is that was in the story that we're dealing with, these verses. That was back in the third year when they were dealing with that initial battle. So we're dealing with 2 years before that in this verse, where it says in this thing, first year of Darius, not the third year of Darius, I rose to be of assistance. Well, what was going on 2 years before that we're like, okay, where are we at in this timeline? And where we're at in the timeline is that was when the first decree was given, where they said, okay, the people of God can go back to Israel. And so, okay, just as simplistic as I can get it. Everybody in this room asked Jesus Christ into your life? Yes. Okay. Who won you to the Lord? Me. Who won you to the Lord? Do you know what took place to make that happen? I was going to church. I was an 11-year-old kid. I was around all kinds of church people. There's a danger, you've heard me say this before, there's a danger when you attend church all your life that you hear everything. Okay, everyone that raises kids, I always say the exact same thing. You pray like a house afire that your child will have an experience with God. That's what you pray for. Not that your child will be religious. Your children can be raised in a church environment and hear it all the time, and so they start thinking because they're hearing it that they've got it. It doesn't work that way. Okay, that's why I tell people all the time, when you pray that prayer, Lord, would you please come into my life? That doesn't save you. What saves you is a giving up of your life to Him. So please forgive me. If the salvation process involves asking Christ into your life and repenting, that means turning away and turning around, you understand how you've got to get that in your head. It's not just, I said this little prayer to save me. Okay? I am a born-again believer, I've told you before, because of what happened in my parents' lives. But I am a born-again believer who was a little person going through church, and I heard sermons every single week. This was back before junior church, so I sat in church as a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I was in those services all the time. And then one day, my dad decided, the church needs to learn how to witness. So they had a guy come to the church to teach everybody how to witness. How many of you have ever been taught how to witness? Okay, on your notes that you have with you tonight, I want you to write someplace. Tonight's assignment when I get home is to write my testimony. Testimony. How did I become a born-again believer? I want you to write that down. You go, okay, why do I need to do that tonight? Because you're hearing me say it tonight. I was a little guy sitting in a thing, and this guy got up and said, I want everyone to write your testimony. I went home from that class. That was on a Friday evening. The class was going to be on Saturday also. I went home on Friday, 11 years old. I sat down, and I went to write my testimony. Something happened. I couldn't write it. So a few minutes later, after not being able to write it, I got up and walked into the living room and looked at my mom and dad who were talking, and I said to my mother, I can't write my testimony. She goes, what do you mean you can't write your testimony? And I looked over on the little coffee table, and they both had their testimony on paper laying on the table. I couldn't write one. My mother said something she shouldn't have said, but she found that out later, and we had a really great talk about it later on, and she learned a powerful lesson from it. She looked at me and said, well, honey, I know you got saved. I was there when you got saved. Had I accepted that? I'd be going to hell today. I went back in my room and I tried to write my testimony again. I came back out and looked at my mom and dad again, and I said, I can't write my testimony. My mother didn't say anything. I figured out later on that when I walked out of the room, my dad lovingly looked at my mom and said, don't say that again. And my dad looked at me and said, well, Frankie, why can't you write your testimony? The long story short was, when I went the next day on Saturday, I asked Jesus Christ into my life, because the guy looked up at everybody. He didn't say that the night before. He just looked up at everybody and said, if you couldn't write your testimony, you don't know Christ. And I found out through that experience, I didn't know the Lord. You go, okay, wait. Why is that so important? Because if I remember the story correctly, the guy that was coming to our church to do what he was going to do got really, really sick, and he almost didn't come. And if I remember the rest of the story correctly, on the way there that night, he got in some kind of accident or a flat tire or something. Everything was against him. Oh, and I also remember, if I remember it correctly, that all the deacons in the church really didn't want this guy coming to do that. You ever been in a church that's run by the deacons instead of the pastor? So they didn't want him to do that. All this battle took place that there were about 12 or 13 people that asked Jesus Christ into their life that week. So just a technical question. Who was battling to keep him from doing what he was going to do? Would everyone agree with me that it's the enemy? Okay, so why does the church so flippantly, maybe not you guys, but why does the church so flippantly have these discussions about the enemy, and we just kind of talk about it like it's just nothing? But if the enemy is really who we say the enemy is, and the enemy is really long-toothed, which he's been doing this for a long time, then don't you think that when the enemy heard the announcement that the children of God were going back to Israel, that the enemy started working overtime? And how he started working overtime was by men walking out to their animals and looking at them and going, back in Israel, I had no animals. And then they walked in their house and they looked at all the shelves where they had food, and they went, back in Israel, I had no food. We struggled every day. And then they saw their wife walk through the house and they went, she's got a really nice robe on. Back when we were in Israel, her robe was in tatters. Why would I want to go back there when I'm here? Well, in their world, the answer was naturally because the temple's back there and worshiping God's back there, and that's the promised land where you're supposed to be. But out of the probably over 1 million people that were in Babylon that it had grown into that, only 40,000 of them went back. Okay, you get the temptation. Sorry, the guys sitting in this room. If you're sitting there, just like I'm preaching about Ruth and Moab, if you're sitting there and you're going, wait a minute, I go back to Israel, I go back to Bethlehem, and they're in the middle of, no rain, whereas I can go to Moab. Yeah, and I know Moab's godless, and I know that they're demon worshipers and everything else, but at least we can make a living. Do you understand the war with most men? But about 40,000 of them were, crazy nutcases who were eccentric, and they went back, but everyone else just stayed. So here's Daniel all freaked, and he's praying, and he's like, God, I don't know what to do. And so all of this just rose to the surface. And the angel looks at Daniel and says in Daniel chapter 11, verse 2, and now I tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. And now the history lesson begins. How many of you hated history when you were in school? Okay. I have this son, Frank, if you don't mind me saying this. I don't remember what thing you told me, but you watch all that stuff on the Roman Empire, those things that you watched on Rome. In your head, how many of those do you think you've watched? A couple of hundred? Okay. So if somebody sat and looked and said, oh, there's these really good documentary type things, right? Okay, podcast type things on the Roman Empire. There's some of you in this room that would go, ooh, where have you been watching those? I'd like to watch those. And there's some of you sitting in this room right now, like probably Wendy, that would go, ain't happening. Not doing it. Okay, did you say history? Boring. Okay, so the problem is all the way through chapter 11, don't come for the next few weeks. Because it's all history. And the problem with it, this prophecy of what's going to happen is so precise and so, well, as I go through it, you'll get that figured out. It starts off with Persia and then moves to the aggression of Persia going against the Greeks. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a history person. The Greek kingdom got split up into 4. And centuries of war took place between 2 empires, the Ptolemaic Empire and the Seleucid Empire. Isn't that real exciting? And for some of you sitting in the room, you're like, no. Okay, well, here's the important part. The prophecy in Daniel chapter 11 is so accurate. And then there's a few other places in the book of Daniel that the prophecy is so accurate that Jews, this is the enemy fighting again, Jews who go will read certain things in Daniel, but we're not reading other things. And we'll read certain things in Isaiah, but we're not reading other things. Why would they skip over a whole chapter in the book of Isaiah? I'm asking out loud. Why? Matt? Because it flat out says coming of the Messiah. And then it says some other really nasty things, like he's going to be killed a certain way. Okay, well, the Messiah in their head was not going to be killed a certain way. The Messiah in their head was going to walk into Rome and go, and all the Roman soldiers were going to die. So how many wants to hear, for those of you that watched the movie The Chosen, when he sat down and had all these different conversations with individuals? Okay, the famous conversation, this is your Bible trivia question for the night, was talking to what guy about, you got to be born of the Spirit, not just water. That was who? Okay, when he looked at Nicodemus and he said that, he said something really boring in Nicodemus's world. He said, I didn't come to do the thing you're thinking. I came for sin. Okay, so every good Jew is going to go, I'm in bondage. My brother was just slaughtered in the street. They took his wife and put her in a box and poured oil over her and turned her into a street lamp for the night. I would really like the Messiah to come in on a white horse and slaughter all of the Roman Empire. You're telling me that he's going to come in on a donkey? And he's here to forgive sin? Okay, you understand that's not big news? Okay, now if you're a believer in the Lord, you're like, no, that's really powerful news. But the kick is that all of that history stuff, the enemy doesn't want Jews to read it because of what happens in their hearts. And so you can go do your own research. There's all kind of cool books out there of Jews who did what some of you are the type of people that you would do. Okay, you're telling me I can read all of this in Isaiah, but you're telling me I can't read these 2 chapters? How many of you in here really late at night underneath your blankets with a flashlight would be in your bed reading those 2 chapters? Even if they told you it was history, right, Wendy? I can't read it. Why can't I read it? Okay, well, here's the kick. Go read those books because it's really cool. They went and read it and they went, oh. And then they read the next chapter and the next chapter, and then they hit that one chapter that said, after this proclamation is made, and after the Jews are released and the city's dealt with, and the moat is dealt with, this many years forward, the Messiah is going to ride into town. and they all had their cell phones, and they all pulled out their calendar, and they marked the day, and all those hundreds of years went by, and Jesus Christ rode into Jerusalem on the day that Daniel said he would. That's why they didn't want him to read it. So they're lost in it. I was talking to a Jewish gentleman one time, blew me away. He looked at me and he said, Jesus was a Gentile. And I went, no, he wasn't. He was a Jew. Okay, I don't know if that guy ever went and researched, but I've listened to a bunch of Jews who have gone, yeah, I finally heard enough. I went and researched it. And that's what changed my life. And so when I am reading this, I have to sit there and say, okay, God, if people get freaked out because all of this stuff is so accurate, then I have to go, what's going on? So, and now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will stir up the entire empire against the realm of Greece. This prophecy is so accurate that there is a whole group of individuals that say that Daniel was not written by Daniel, that Daniel was written almost 400 years later, and that Daniel's really not a book of prophecy, it's a history book, because it's way too accurate. All of these prophecies are made before this came true. Cyrus was the current ruler when they were dealing with this. After him came a guy named Cambyses. After Cambyses, named Pseudo-Smyrnus. After him came Darius the First. And then here comes Xerxes. So when it says, then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them, write in your notes someplace, that was Xerxes the First. And almost all of you have seen all the stories around him. He got so rich through his daddy's inheritance, and he got so rich because he dealt with taxation. And you've already heard me say this before. The Babylonian Empire was the first one, and that was dealing with all this wonderful gold stuff. And then the Medo-Persian Empire came. What was their color? What was their metal? Gold, then silver. Okay, and the silver, the gold was, I was dying laughing the other day, because I have a new vision of Nebuchadnezzar in my head, King Nebuchadnezzar. Every single time I see a picture of him sitting on a throne or whatever, I think of Trump. That's all I can see him as now. The reason why is because Nebuchadnezzar decorated every single thing in Babylon with what? Gold. What's Trump doing? There you go. And so the next empire that came was the Medo-Persian Empire, and their color was silver. The reason why their color was silver was, if I say silver to some of you even today talk about silver in your pocket. We use it for money exchange, and that's what Xerxes did with it. He raised taxes. He took his daddy's inheritance, and in 480 BC, he led the Persians against the Greeks. All of the upsettedness against them, because it's really important, again, as you read through this, then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will stir up the entire empire against the realm of Greece. And that's what he did. Okay, and the reason why he did it was it wasn't for a whole bunch of political things that he was dealing with. It wasn't because of all this, animosity stuff that we try to deal with personally. It was because he wanted revenge for a revolt that took place in his kingdom, and that revolt was led by the Athens and the Spartans. They were the guys who killed the Persian envoys. Okay, the Ionian revolt was a revolt that took place where the capital of Persia, Sardis, got leveled, and so all of these people were angry for all of those reasons. And so what they were dealing with, it was for a war thing. We want to destroy these guys. So in the midst of that, Daniel chapter 11, verse 3 says, and a mighty king will arise. He will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. And guys, the Greeks were led by a legendary individual. How many of you know the name of that individual? Okay, Alexander the Great. So write in your notes, and a mighty king will arise. That's Alexander the Great. He will rule with great authority, and he will do as he pleases. So the first thing we deal with is a mighty king will arise. Scholars agree that this is him. Why was he so mighty? A couple of things I'll give you. He was a genius on the battlefield. He was a genius to walking across the field and going, okay, this is the best place if we're going to fight to use our men, our foot soldiers, and over here is the best place to use our horses. His army included a skilled group of people on horses, well-trained archers, well-trained javelin throwers, one of the most powerful infantries in the world. He believed in a great big, what I would call well-rounded fighting force. In fact, for your notes, he fought 11 years in a campaign and never lost. Okay, he surrounded himself with military people that were off the chart, and so when it says he does as he pleases, it literally seemed like no one could stop him. How many of you have ever heard what eventually stopped him? Okay, he's full of some profound stories. There's some history about him that you'll find super interesting. Alexander the Great had a rule: when you defeated a city, you sacked the city, and you ransacked the city. You literally came in and told all of your soldiers that they could take everything they wanted out of the city that they just took. How many of you know that when he was in the middle of trying to do his campaign against the Persian Empire, that Jerusalem was the city he came to, and he didn't sack it? Do any of you know why? So Alexander the Great was laying in bed. He was sound asleep, and he woke up having a dream. In his dream, he saw a group of priests wearing white coming out of the gates of Jerusalem. When he rode up to Jerusalem, these priests came walking out of the city. He freaked out in front of all of his men, saying that the dream that he had was coming true. Do you know what the priest did to Alexander the Great? They walked up to him with the book of Daniel, and they opened up the book of Daniel, and they read it to him. And as they were reading it to Alexander the Great, they said, see, it says right there that you are going to defeat Persia. They read through all the stuff of what was going to happen, that his life was going to be shortened, and it literally freaked him out. And so standing there having that conversation, he looked at the high priest and he said, wait a minute, time out. Can I do something to honor your God? And the high priest at the time looked at him and said, come in, make a sacrifice this way. So Alexander the Great went into Jerusalem and through the directions of the high priest made a sacrifice. And if you want to know where we have all that information, how many of you know the historian named Josephus? He's the guy that wrote all that. So Jerusalem didn't get sacked, and they didn't get everything stolen from them like everyone else had done. So again, and a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority. And that verse where it says, and do as he pleases, that was the thing that was so profound, is that not only did he fight in a madman way, but he decided not to sack the city of Jerusalem over what the book of Daniel said. Daniel chapter 11, verse 4 says, but as soon as he was arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded, because his sovereignty will be removed and given to others besides them. As soon as he is arisen, as soon as this great thing starts coming forth and doing all the things he's doing, his kingdom will be broken up. What's the only way that his kingdom is going to be broken up? He's got to die. Okay, now here we go with all the wonderful stories. How many of you have ever heard the story of Alexander the Great, that Alexander the Great was sitting in his tent, and the reason why he died is there were no more places to conquer. And so sitting in his tent, he got so drunk that he got alcohol poisoning, and he died. How many of you have ever heard this story? Okay, it's bull. Okay, now how we know it's bull is because the path that Alexander the Great was going, they were conquering one place after another, and they were getting ready to conquer all this other area. So all the stories that you will read about Alexander the Great saying there was nothing else to conquer, and I became so depressed I just drank myself to death. No, that didn't happen. Okay, what most historians will tell you is there's one of about 3 diseases he might have had, but a whole bunch of guys settle on he had malaria because in the particular area that they were at, that was the biggie that was going on. And so every once in a while, you know, when you're reading through things, you don't believe everything you read, right? Okay, but what we know in Scripture is Scripture tells us that this guy's kingdom got divided into 4 different groups, and it happened. We know that he sat there looking at his generals before he died and going, I don't have anyone to take my throne. And what it would do for me is I believe the strongest guy should take the kingdom. Okay, if your kingdom gets divided into 4 guys and before the head guy dies, he looks at everybody and says, I think the strongest guy should take the kingdom. What do you think is going to happen? War's going to break out. And for the next years to come, that's all they did was fight. They literally just tore each other apart trying to figure out who was going to run the empire. Okay, because you already know the answer that's coming after this. Who finally took the Greek empire down? Okay, do you know why they took Rome down? Or why Rome took them down? Say it again. They're better fighters and okay, you have a rule. When we go all the way back to the Babylonian Empire, their color was gold, right? Okay, so that was what everything in their world meant. Would you please tell me what their weaponry was like? Okay, the majority of everything that their empire used was wood. Okay, you go from them to the next empire, the Persians and the Medes. If you saw a Persian soldier running across the battlefield, he was wearing cloth material with a cloth hat. He had a wooden shield, and sometimes, because iron ore was something that they could get, his sword would be made out of iron ore. How strong is iron ore? But you would agree with me it's stronger than something made out of wood, right? Okay, then in the midst of that, you have this next empire that comes in. Their color on the statue was gold, silver, what was next? Bronze. All of their weapons were brass. So here you have the Medo-Persians running across the battlefield, and you have the Greeks running across the battlefield, and they both meet each other, and you got one group of guys standing there in cloth material with wood shields, wood swords, and some iron ore shields, but then you have this whole other group of dudes coming in, and they have learned this wonderful process called brass, and they're wearing helmets and shields and breastplates and swords. Who do you think naturally won? So somewhere in Italy, amongst the Roman Empire, some dude invented the process to take iron and turn it into steel. And the instant they developed the ability to turn something into steel, and swords were now made from steel, what do you think happened to swords made of brass, bronze, when they hit a sword made of steel? The majority of weapons that are used in battle is what produces victories. That's why you live in the United States of America and you hear people say all the time, we have to keep our technology ahead of some other nation. Why? If they develop technology that we can't fight against, that means we don't have a way to defend ourselves. Okay. So all of this that is going on is history that they can now look backwards and go, okay, I got it. As soon as he had risen, his kingdom, verse 4, will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass. It was broken up into 4 different generals. That group of generals was called the Diadochi, and their names are unimportant because you won't remember them. It also said that not through his own descendants. There is one group of theologians that try to say that Alexander the Great had 2 kids. One says he had no kids. History says he had 1 child. The child was born after he died. The little guy grew up. He tried to serve under his uncle, who was Philip III, but they wound up killing him in 317 AD so he wouldn't have any way to say, I have access to the throne. The next part of your verse says, nor according to his authority which he wielded. It just means that that kingdom was so in disarray that nothing could get off the ground, and they eventually got destroyed. And you know every one of the stories about certain things that took place between the Persians and Xerxes and the Greek Empire and all of that stuff. Okay, what I have to say to you in closing to let you answer your questions tonight. David Gushee said, he, God, knows the future better than we know the past. So I use this as just an illustration for Bible verses. If I pick this up and I say God made a prediction, and the prediction was that there was going to be a king in charge of the Babylonian Empire. I know this history stuff drives you nuts. But after them was going to come another empire, and that empire was going to be like this. And historically, we can go, oh, that was the Medo-Persian Empire. And then it says there's another kingdom that's going to come. And that kingdom that is going to come, that guy is going to cause a problem everywhere. And he's going to be phenomenal at this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do that. But he's going to die really quick. So Alexander the Great died in his, 28 to 30? Young guy? But the Bible's full of that. Then I hear that there's going to come a Roman Empire. Okay, if you sit down and you see all these things, does your brain ever stop and go, if God can be so accurate in the past that he makes these prophecies, and some of those prophecies are about a baby that would be born in Bethlehem, that was born of a virgin, and all of the stories that go along with that, and we've seen every bit of that come true. So if all of that's come true, and now we step 2,000 years over here, and the Bible says that Jesus Christ is going to come back, if all that stuff happened in the beginning and in the middle and now we're here, what do you think the chances are that Jesus Christ is going to come back? So that's why this is important, okay?